The helicopter is going down. Not a drill, not a simulation. Actually going down. The engine is screaming. The cabin is filling with smoke. Most people would be frozen, screaming, praying, preparing to die. But look at the Navy SEAL in the back. His heart rate, barely elevated. His breathing, controlled, steady. His face, calm. Not because he's unaware of the danger. He knows exactly what's happening. He understands the stakes. He's just not panicking. While others are losing their minds, he's running calculations, assessing options, preparing for impact, planning his next 3 moves. The chaos around him is just noise. He's already in action mode, already problem solving, already focused on what he can control. This isn't superhuman. This is trained. Or imagine this. You're underwater. It's pitch black. You're in full combat gear. Your rebreather just failed. You're 30 feet down. You have maybe 90 seconds of air in your lungs. Most people would bolt to the surface and blow their lungs out from rapid ascent. They die from panic, not from drowning. But a SEAL in this situation doesn't panic. They slow down. They assess. They signal their teammate. They buddy breathe. They ascend slowly, releasing air gradually. They survive because while their body is screaming, their mind is quiet. This ability to remain calm when everything is falling apart isn't luck. It's not genetics. It's not a personality trait you're born with, it's a skill that's trained, tested, and reinforced until it becomes automatic. The question is, how? How does someone learn to override every instinct their body has? How do you train a human nervous system to stay calm when it should be in full panic mode? How do you build a brain that can function at peak performance when most people can't even think straight? The answer isn't simple. It's not one technique. It's not one mindset shift. It's a combination of brutal selection, relentless training, psychological conditioning, and a very specific understanding of how the mind works under extreme stress. Navy SEALs aren't born calm under pressure. They're forged that way, and the process breaks most people who attempt it. Only about 25% of candidates who start BUD/S, basic underwater demolition SEAL training, actually graduate. The rest quit, not because they're weak, but because the training is specifically designed to create chaos, to induce panic, to overwhelm your nervous system until you either adapt or break. And here's what most people don't understand. The training isn't about making you tougher. It's about making you think differently when you're terrified. It's about rewiring how your brain responds to stress. It's about teaching you that panic is a choice, not an inevitability. Because here's the truth. Everyone feels fear. SEALs feel fear. They're human. Their amygdala fires just like yours does when danger appears. But somewhere between the fear response and the behavioral response, they've built a gap. A space where they can observe the fear, acknowledge it, and then choose how to respond. Most people don't have that gap. For most people, fear triggers an automatic reaction. Fight, flight, or freeze. The body takes over. The rational mind shuts down. And in high-stakes situations, that automatic response gets people killed. SEALs have trained that gap until it's wide enough to make decisions. They feel the adrenaline. They notice their heart rate increase. They recognize the fear, but they don't let it drive. They stay in the driver's seat. And this ability, this capacity to remain functional when everything is chaos, isn't just useful in combat. It's useful in any high-pressure situation. A medical emergency, a business crisis, a relationship falling apart, a sudden loss. The ability to stay calm when everything around you is burning is one of the most valuable psychological skills a human can develop. So this isn't just about SEALs. This is about the psychology of performance under pressure. This is about understanding what happens in the brain during chaos and how to train that brain to function when most people shut down. Because the difference between someone who panics and someone who performs isn't innate ability. It's preparation. It's training. It's thousands of repetitions of staying calm when your body wants to freak out. It's exposure to controlled chaos until chaos becomes normal. And the remarkable thing is, this can be trained. Not to the level of a Navy SEAL maybe, but the principles, The techniques, the mindset, those are accessible to anyone willing to do the work. So let's break it down. Let's look at how SEALs are selected, how they're trained, what happens in their brains that's different from most people, and most importantly, what you can learn from their psychology to perform better under pressure in your own life. There's a debate in the special operations community. Are SEALs born or made? The answer is both, but not in the way most people think. Selection weeds out people who can't be trained, but it's not selecting for physical strength or intelligence. It's selecting for a very specific psychological trait, the ability to suffer without quitting. Bud S doesn't care if you're the fastest swimmer or the strongest runner. What it cares about is whether you'll keep moving when every fiber of your being is telling you to stop. Whether you'll stay in the freezing ocean when hypothermia is setting in. Whether you'll keep functioning when you're so sleep-deprived you're hallucinating. The infamous Hell Week is designed specifically to answer one question: will you quit? It's 5.5 days of continuous training with maybe 4 hours of total sleep. You're wet, cold, sandy, exhausted beyond anything you've ever experienced, and the only way out is to ring the bell. One ring, and you're done. The pain stops. The suffering ends. But here's what's interesting. The people who quit during Hell Week aren't necessarily the weakest physically. Often they're strong, fit, capable. They quit because psychologically they hit a wall and decided the pain wasn't worth it. They did a cost-benefit analysis and chose comfort over completion. The people who don't quit, they're not necessarily tougher. They've just made a different decision. They've decided that quitting is not an option. Not because they're physically superior, but because they've trained their mind to reject the option of quitting, even when quitting would be the rational choice. This is the first layer of SEAL psychology, the elimination of quitting as a possibility. For most people, when things get hard enough, quitting becomes an option. They evaluate whether continuing is worth the pain. SEALs are selected for their ability to close that door, to remove quitting from the decision tree entirely. But selection only gets you in the door. Training is what creates the calm under chaos. Bud S is designed to induce panic and then force you to perform anyway. Pool competency tests are a perfect example. Instructors will tie your scuba gear in knots underwater. They'll rip your mask off. They'll create a situation where most people would bolt to the surface in terror. And your job is to calmly untie the knots, fix your gear, and continue the exercise. If you panic and surface, you fail. This is stress inoculation. You're exposed to chaos repeatedly in a controlled environment until your nervous system learns that chaos is survivable. Your brain starts to recategorize these experiences. What once triggered panic now triggers problem solving. There's also compartmentalization training. SEALs learn to break overwhelming situations into manageable pieces. You don't think about the entire Hell Week. You think about the next evolution, then the next meal, then the next hour. You shrink your focus until the task in front of you is the only thing that exists. This is a cognitive skill, and it's trained through repetition. Every time you're exhausted and they say, "Just get to the next meal," you're practicing breaking down the unbearable into the manageable. Over time, this becomes automatic. Breathing control is another core component. SEALs are trained in tactical breathing, also called box breathing or combat breathing. 4 seconds in. 4 seconds hold. 4 seconds out. 4 seconds hold. Repeat. This isn't just relaxation. This is physiological regulation. When you control your breath, you're directly influencing your autonomic nervous system. You're telling your body, "We're not in danger, we're in control," and your heart rate drops. Your thinking clears. Your panic response diminishes. They practice this until it's reflexive. Until the moment stress appears, the breathing pattern kicks in automatically. It becomes a circuit breaker for panic. Scenario-based training is also critical. SEALs train for every possible contingency: equipment failure, ambush, man down, extraction under fire. They run these scenarios hundreds of times until the responses are automatic. So when chaos happens in real life, it's not new. It's just another Tuesday. This is why SEALs often say, combat is easier than training. Because in training, the instructors are actively trying to break you. In combat, the enemy is just trying to kill you, and you've already been prepared for that. But here's the key insight. Stress inoculation only works if the training is harder than reality. You can't prepare for chaos with comfort. You have to train in chaos. You have to voluntarily put yourself in situations that trigger the exact response you're trying to control. This is where most people fail in life. They avoid stress, they seek comfort, and then when real chaos hits, they have no reference point. They panic because their nervous system has never been trained to do anything else. SEALs don't avoid stress. They seek it. They practice being uncomfortable until uncomfortable becomes normal. And once your baseline shifts, once chaos is your training ground, actual emergencies feel manageable. The final piece is team accountability. You don't quit because you'd be letting down your teammates. This social pressure is intentionally built into the training. You carry logs together. You suffer together. You succeed or fail together. And that shared experience creates bonds strong enough to override individual desire to quit. So yes, SEALs are selected for a certain psychological baseline. But the calm under chaos? That's trained, methodically, repeatedly, until it's not a conscious choice anymore. It's just how they operate. Let's talk about what's happening neurologically when a Navy SEAL stays calm and everyone else panics. When most people encounter a life-threatening situation, their amygdala activates. This is the brain's alarm system. It detects threat and triggers the fight-or-flight response. Adrenaline floods the system. Heart rate spikes. Blood flow redirects to muscles. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thought, starts to shut down. The body is preparing to fight or run, not to think. This response is automatic. It's evolutionary. And for most of human history, it kept us alive. But in modern high-stakes situations, panic often makes things worse. The person who panics underwater drowns. The person who panics under fire makes fatal mistakes. The person who panics in a crisis can't problem solve. SEALs experience the same initial amygdala activation. They're human. Their brains detect threat. But here's what's different. Their prefrontal cortex doesn't shut down. It stays online. It stays active, and this is the neurological key to staying calm under chaos. How? First, repeated exposure. The amygdala learns through experience. If you're exposed to a threat and survive it, the amygdala recalibrates. The next time that threat appears, the response is less intense. This is called habituation. SEALs are exposed to life-threatening scenarios so many times in training that their amygdala stops treating them as novelty. The brain has a category for, this is dangerous but manageable. And when danger becomes familiar, the panic response weakens. Second, cognitive reappraisal. This is the conscious reframing of a situation. Instead of, I'm going to die, the SEAL thinks, this is a problem to solve. This shift in interpretation changes the emotional response, and with practice, this reframing becomes automatic. Neuroscience shows that cognitive reappraisal activates the prefrontal cortex, which then inhibits the amygdala. So by consciously choosing how to interpret the situation, SEALs are literally using their rational brain to quiet their fear response. Third, breathing regulation. When you slow your breathing, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts the fight-or-flight response. Your heart rate decreases. Your blood pressure normalizes. Your thinking clears. SEALs use tactical breathing not just to relax, but to maintain prefrontal cortex function. Because when you're calm, you can think. And when you can think, you can act strategically instead of reactively. There's also attentional control. Under stress, most people's attention scatters. They're overwhelmed by stimuli. Their focus fragments. But SEALs are trained in selective attention. They focus on what matters and filter out the rest. This is a skill, and it's trained through exercises that force you to complete complex tasks under extreme distraction. Over time, the brain gets better at maintaining focus, even when chaos is swirling around you. Research on elite performers shows that they have enhanced executive function under stress. Executive function is the brain's ability to plan, organize, and execute tasks. For most people, Stress impairs executive function. For highly trained individuals, it remains intact. This isn't magic, it's neuroplasticity. The brain adapts based on what you practice. If you practice staying focused under stress, your brain builds stronger neural pathways for focus under stress. If you practice panicking under stress, your brain gets better at panicking. SEALs also demonstrate lower cortisol reactivity in response to stress. Cortisol is the stress hormone. High levels impair thinking and memory. But studies on special operations soldiers show that their cortisol response to acute stress is blunted compared to the general population. This isn't because they're born with different biology. It's because their endocrine system has adapted to repeated stress exposure. Their bodies have learned that stress is routine, not an emergency. So the cortisol spike is smaller. There's also evidence of increased vagal tone in elite operators. The vagus nerve is part of the parasympathetic nervous system. High vagal tone means you can downshift from stress to calm more quickly, and vagal tone can be trained through breathing exercises, cold exposure, and meditation. Then there's automaticity. When a skill is practiced enough, it moves from conscious processing to automatic processing. This is why SEALs can perform complex tasks under stress without thinking. The skills are encoded in the basal ganglia, which handles automatic behaviors. This frees up cognitive resources. While others are using all their mental energy just to function, SEALs can allocate that energy to strategic thinking because the basics are on autopilot. Finally, there's mental rehearsal. SEALs use visualization extensively. They mentally rehearse scenarios before missions. And brain imaging studies show that mental rehearsal activates the same neural pathways as physical practice. So when they encounter a situation they've visualized, the brain treats it as familiar. It's not novel. It's not shocking. It's just another iteration of something they've already experienced mentally. And familiarity reduces fear. The neuroscience is clear. Calmness under chaos is trainable. It's not a fixed trait. It's a set of neural adaptations that develop through specific, deliberate practice. And while most people will never reach SEAL-level performance, the principles are universal. You can train your brain to stay calm. You can strengthen your prefrontal cortex. You can regulate your stress response. It just requires exposing yourself to controlled stress, practicing cognitive reappraisal, mastering your breath, and building automaticity in essential skills. The brain you have today is the result of what you've practiced. If you want a brain that stays calm under pressure, you need to practice staying calm under pressure. And that starts with small stressors and builds gradually. Let's break down the specific psychological techniques that SEALs use to maintain calm under chaos. These aren't abstract concepts. They're practical tools that can be trained and applied. Box breathing, tactical breathing. This is the foundational technique. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, repeat. This pattern activates the parasympathetic nervous system and overrides the fight-or-flight response. SEALs use this before missions, during moments of high stress, and even in combat. It's simple, but it works because it gives you something to control when everything else feels out of control. The 6-inch rule. Focus only on what's directly in front of you, not the entire mission, not the whole problem. Just the next 6 inches, the next step, the next breath, the next action. This prevents cognitive overload. When you're overwhelmed, your brain shuts down. But when you shrink your focus to the immediate task, your brain can handle it, one thing at a time. Then the next thing. Then the next. Compartmentalization. SEALs are trained to separate emotion from action. You can feel afraid and still perform. You can feel exhausted and still move. You acknowledge the feeling, but you don't let it dictate behavior. This is different from suppression. Suppression means pushing the emotion down. Compartmentalization means creating space between the feeling and the response. You feel it, you note it, and then you act anyway. Positive self-talk. This isn't motivational fluff. It's cognitive reframing. Instead of "I can't do this," and you think, "Well, this is hard, but I've trained for this." Instead of "I'm going to die," you think, "I've been in worse situations." The language you use internally shapes your emotional state. SEALs train specific mantras and use them under stress to maintain a functional mindset. Visualization and mental rehearsal. Before every mission, SEALs visualize the scenario. They mentally walk through every step. What could go wrong? How they'll respond? What success looks like? This mental practice creates neural pathways. So when the real situation unfolds, it feels familiar. The brain has already done this. And familiarity reduces fear. Mission focus. SEALs don't focus on themselves. They focus on the mission. This shift from self to task is powerful because self-focus amplifies fear. When you're thinking about your safety, your discomfort, your fear, those feelings intensify. But when you're focused on the objective, on your teammates, on the task, there's less mental space for panic. The mission becomes bigger than your fear. Accepting discomfort. SEALs don't fight against pain or discomfort. They accept it as part of the process. This is radically different from how most people relate to discomfort. Most people resist it. They tense up. They wish it would stop. And that resistance creates more suffering. SEALs are trained to observe discomfort without resistance. Yes, I'm cold. Yes, I'm tired. And I'm going to keep moving. Arousal control. There's an optimal level of arousal for performance. Too low and you're sluggish. Too high and you're panicked. SEALs are trained to recognize their arousal level and adjust it. If they're too amped up, they use breathing to bring it down. If they're too low, they use movement or aggression to bring it up. This is active regulation, not passive reaction. Detachment. In high-stress moments, SEALs practice psychological detachment. They step back mentally and observe the situation as if they're watching it happen to someone else. This creates emotional distance, which allows for clearer thinking. It's not dissociation. It's perspective. You're still engaged, but you're not consumed by the emotion of the moment. The 40% rule. This is a SEAL mindset principle. When your mind is telling you you're done, you're only 40% done. Your brain quits long before your body actually needs to. This knowledge changes behavior. When you feel like you can't go on, you remind yourself that you actually have 60% left. And often just knowing that is enough to keep you moving. Post-event processing. After every mission or training evolution, SEALs debrief. What worked? What didn't? What did we learn? This isn't just organizational. It's psychological. It helps the brain process and integrate the experience. It turns chaos into lessons, and lessons reduce fear the next time. Humor. This might sound strange, but humor is a critical coping mechanism. SEALs use dark humor constantly. It's not disrespect. It's a way to reframe stress. When you can laugh at the absurdity of a situation, you're signaling to your brain that you're not overwhelmed. You're in control enough to find humor. And that psychological shift is powerful. These techniques aren't just for SEALs. They're for anyone who wants to perform under pressure. The principles are universal. You can practice box breathing in traffic. You can use the 6-inch rule when work is overwhelming. You can visualize difficult conversations. You can compartmentalize fear when facing uncertainty. The difference between SEALs and most people isn't that SEALs have special techniques. It's that they practice these techniques thousands of times until they're automatic. And that's something anyone can do. Not all SEALs are calm in the same way. There are different psychological profiles, different temperaments, different expressions of composure under fire. Let's explore them. The Iceman. This operator is naturally low arousal. They're not faking calm. They genuinely don't get rattled easily. Their baseline heart rate is low. Their stress response is muted. For them, staying calm under fire isn't hard work. It's just their default state. These guys are rare, but they exist. The advantage is obvious, they're unflappable. The disadvantage is sometimes they're too calm. They might not react quickly enough because they're not feeling the urgency that drives action. The controlled aggressor. This operator channels stress into focused aggression. They're not panicking, but they're also not serene. They use the adrenaline. They harness the energy. They become more intense, more focused, more lethal under pressure. Think of a predator locking onto prey. That's this type. They're controlled, but they're also activated. The advantage is they perform at peak physical capacity under stress. The risk is they can sometimes over-escalate or make aggressive decisions when patience might be better. The analyzer. This operator goes hypercognitive under stress. While others might react instinctively, this person slows down and thinks. They're processing variables, running scenarios, calculating odds. They're the ones calling audibles mid-mission because they've identified a better approach. The advantage is strategic brilliance under pressure. The disadvantage is sometimes they overthink when action is needed. The stoic. This operator has trained emotional regulation to such a degree that their external presentation is almost robotic. No matter what's happening, their face is neutral. Their voice is steady. Their movements are deliberate. This isn't natural. It's cultivated. They've practiced controlling every micro-expression, every vocal inflection. The advantage is they project calm to the entire team, which reduces collective panic. The disadvantage is they can seem disconnected or cold, and sometimes they're suppressing rather than processing emotions, which can create long-term issues. The optimist. This operator maintains calm by finding the positive angle in every situation. Equipment failure? At least we found out now and not later. Ambush? Good. Now we know where they are. This isn't naivety. It's trained cognitive reframing. They genuinely believe that most problems are solvable and that panic makes things worse. The advantage is they keep morale high. The disadvantage is sometimes their optimism can blind them to real danger. The quiet professional. This is the operator who doesn't say much but radiates competence. They don't need to assert dominance or prove themselves. They just execute. Under stress, they get quieter, not louder, more focused, not scattered. They trust their training completely. The advantage is they're incredibly reliable. You know exactly what you're getting. The disadvantage is they sometimes don't communicate enough, which can create coordination issues. Here's what all these types share. They've all internalized that panic is a choice. They might have different baseline temperaments, different strategies, different ways of manifesting calm, but they all believe that how they respond to chaos is within their control. They also share extreme preparation. They know their equipment inside and out. They've rehearsed scenarios endlessly. They trust their team implicitly. This preparation creates a foundation of confidence. When you know you're prepared, it's easier to stay calm. They also understand the cost of panic. They've seen people die because they panicked. They've seen missions fail because someone lost composure. So they have a very clear motivation to stay calm. Survival. Theirs and their teammates. That's not abstract. It's visceral. And finally, they all practice humility about fear. They don't pretend they're fearless. They acknowledge that fear is present. But they've trained the ability to act despite it. This is different from bravado. Bravado says, "I'm not afraid." Real courage says, "I'm afraid and I'm doing it anyway." The lesson here is that you don't need to fit one specific profile to develop calm under pressure. You can be naturally low arousal or naturally high arousal. You can be analytical or instinctive. You can be stoic or expressive. What matters is that you train your specific temperament to stay functional under stress. Know yourself. Know how you naturally respond to chaos. And then build skills around that. If you tend to overthink, practice acting decisively. If you tend to react impulsively, practice pausing and breathing. Use your strengths. Shore up your weaknesses, and train until your response to chaos is automatic. So how do you, as a civilian, train the kind of calm under pressure that SEALs demonstrate? You're not going to Hell Week. You're not doing underwater knot tying. But the principles? Those are accessible. Start with controlled exposure to stress. You can't build stress tolerance by avoiding stress. You need to voluntarily put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Cold showers are a great starting point. They're safe, controllable, but genuinely uncomfortable. Every time you step into cold water and stay calm, you're training your nervous system to override panic. Start with 30 seconds. Build to several minutes. The physical discomfort isn't the point. The mental control is. Practice tactical breathing daily. Don't wait for a crisis to use box breathing. Practice it every day. In the car, before meetings, when you're anxious. Make it automatic. So when real stress hits, the pattern kicks in without thinking. 5 minutes a day is enough to create a measurable difference in your stress response over time. Build physical resilience. Physical and mental resilience are linked. When you push your body, you're also training your mind. High-intensity interval training, long endurance efforts, uncomfortable physical challenges, these build the capacity to suffer without quitting. You don't need to be a SEAL. You just need to regularly do hard physical things that you don't want to do. Visualize difficult scenarios. Spend time mentally rehearsing challenges you might face. A difficult conversation, a presentation, a crisis. Walk through it mentally. See yourself staying calm, responding well, handling it. This mental practice creates familiarity, which reduces fear when the real situation occurs. Shrink your focus during overwhelm. When you're overwhelmed, use the 6-inch rule. What's the very next thing you need to do? Just that. Not the whole problem. Just the next step, then the next. This prevents paralysis and keeps you moving forward. Reframe stress as a challenge, not a threat. Research shows that how you interpret stress changes its physiological impact. If you see stress as a threat, your body responds with fear and constriction. If you see it as a challenge, your body responds with focus and energy. Practice reframing. This is hard, but I can handle it. Embrace discomfort regularly. Do things that are uncomfortable by choice. Fast for a day, sleep on the floor, take the hard conversation, sit with boredom. Train your nervous system to tolerate discomfort without needing to escape it immediately. This builds resilience that transfers to other areas. Eliminate rumination. SEALs don't ruminate. They assess, decide, and act. If you're spiraling mentally, worrying about things you can't control, you're wasting cognitive resources. Practice catching yourself in rumination loops and redirecting to action. What can I actually do right now? Do that. Nothing? Then let it go. Build skills to mastery. Confidence under pressure comes from competence. If you're worried about a presentation, practice until you could do it in your sleep. If you're worried about a physical challenge, train until you know you can handle it. Mastery creates calm. Debrief yourself. After any stressful event, review it. What did I do well? What could I improve? What did I learn? This turns stress into data, and data reduces fear next time. Connect to something bigger than yourself. SEALs stay calm because the mission matters more than their comfort. You need a mission too. What matters to you? Why are you doing this? When your why is bigger than your fear has less power. Accept that you'll never be fearless. Stop trying to eliminate fear. Train to act despite it. Fear is information. It's not a stop sign. Acknowledge it. Thank it for trying to protect you. And then do the thing anyway. Build a resilient identity. Start seeing yourself as someone who stays calm under pressure. Not because you're special, but because you've trained for it. Every time you practice these techniques, you're voting for that identity. And over time, the identity becomes real. You're not going to become a Navy SEAL, but you can become someone who doesn't panic when things fall apart. You can become someone who thinks clearly under stress. You can become someone who performs when others freeze. It's not about genetics, it's not about luck, it's about training. And training is available to anyone willing to do the work. If this resonated, share it. And if you want more explorations of elite performance and the psychology of excellence, subscribe. Because there's a lot more where this came from.